I remember when Final Fantasy XIV was first announced on June 2nd, 2009. I didn't care much about the game then. There wasn't enough information to sink my teeth into or even friends to carry any sort of excitement with me. Things changed when I was invited to work on a 14 fan site called FF14blog.com. I bring this up because despite my later experiences with the site, it helped ignite my interest in the game before its launch. More importantly, it brought me closer to the people within the community that I would usually shy away from. I found myself talking with people I never would have had the courage to talk to, and caring more deeply about a game and its progress than being a simple consumer of the end product. In fact, I still remember the day I received a cease and desist letter from Bayonne for an article that I hadn't even written, and the panic that washed over me when he followed me on Twitter. Is he out to get me was a thought that entered my mind, but I slowly came to realize how he and the other community managers are truly invested in the game to be bothered with a nobody like myself. The months leading up to 14's release was a strange time for me because of the conflicting feelings friends had over the game and my personal feelings over it. While people complained about the copy-pasta terrain, the UI, and more, I could only see a game with gorgeous landscape, a character creator that had far more customization than its previous iteration, and a story that had me wanting to know more about the world of Eorzea. Some of my fondest memories were of the original features that are now long gone. Mobs following you from the spawn point of the Aetheryte camp, 16-man parties, and a mob AI that made me feel that the game was alive, when mobs would perk up and peer at you in wonderment or caution. Though I enjoy these aspects, there were other parts of the game that slowly became apparent to me and hindered my enjoyment of the game. Leveling was oftentimes difficult for me, and my short attention span and busy life. Leaves had an annoying timer, and while the game was pretty and the mob AI interesting and lifelike, there was a part of the game that felt lifeless and dull. It was a step back from the world of Vana'diel, where NPCs ran back and forth on a predetermined path, but moved nonetheless and would even participate in battles with you. I increasingly found myself talking about the old times in Vana'diel with both my old and new friends, and looking wistfully at the world I had given my all to protect and defend against the likes of the Shadowlord, the Zillart, and Promathia. I ended up leaving Eorzea for a short time and made a return to the land of Vana'diel. During that time, I ended up solidifying the relationships I made in 14 and strengthening the ones I had in 11. With those in hand, I made a return to 14 just as evidence of change and progress was being made apparent under the helm of Naoki Yoshida. The game was easily more enjoyable than it was previously, and I tried to encourage others who had turned their noses up against the game at its launch to try and give it another chance. I found that the implementation of the job system, dungeons, and the Dalamud questline were but icing on a cake that was made sweeter by the strengthened friendships I made during the break in Vana'diel, and the new ones I had made because of Twitter, my podcast, and fan site. For me, the game wasn't just about what was missing or being implemented, but the wonderful people I met along the way. We all had a common interest in a game that, while not fully polished, had a special place in our hearts and that made us look forward to the future. I may not have been in a large slingshell, but I truly treasure the close friendships that I have built to be more meaningful than any relationship I had made in real life. When the servers came to a close on November 2012, I remember trying fruitlessly to log on to Gugnir for the last time. It was to no avail due to the instability of the servers, proof of why the game needed to be taken down and reborn. Yet when the end of an era trailer was revealed after the last few minutes of the original game, I found myself in tears. I cried, I bawled, I felt absolutely ravaged by the idea that the game, that I not only played, but lived through in-game and out via my website and podcast, was decimated because of one man's ego and the anger unleashed by a long captive dragon. I went to sleep that night worried about the game, the fate of Luswa, and the other adventurers and the people of Eorzea. I wondered, what would happen to them during that 5-year jump? Were they alive? Would they be okay? I never roleplayed in 14, but I did care about the world enough to wonder what would happen, and waited anxiously for any information that would allude to their unknown fate. Of course, months went by without much news. It was an uncomfortable feeling at times, I had spent a year playing 14 at least twice a week with my friends, and I was reduced to biding my time until the eventual re-release. I felt anxious and most definitely restless, but as they say, patience is a virtue. The wait seemed well worth it when Alpha and then Beta came along, and I was able to see firsthand what had happened to the world I had temporarily said goodbye to back in November. When logging into A Realm Reborn, I found myself at ease and yet overwhelmed by meeting an old friend again. There are aspects that are the same, and that remind you strongly of who your friend once was. But since it had been a while since we had parted ways, I found myself trying to learn more about my old friend and what was new and different. There are definitely a lot of old things, but they were blended so well with the new that it felt like a new game altogether, with the pieces of the past gently tucked in pockets of the new makeover. The zones no longer have the copy-pasta terrain people had commented on during 1.0, and are so gorgeous and varied that I often find myself looking at the map more often than I feel I should. Gridani has especially changed its appearance and is no longer the tube city I fondly remember calling it. Instead, Gridani is the lush, mysterious forested area I had originally imagined it to be. And I often found myself reluctant to further explore particular areas because of how creepy it was compared to the rest. In fact, the land is so varied, I once found myself getting separated from my group during Phase 3 and ended up at the bottom of a cliff surrounded by slugs while searching for fates. I felt miserable and lost, and yet my friends on Skype were encouraging me to meet up with them and to see what they were oohing and awing over. It was difficult finding my way out of the mess I had gotten myself into, but it was well worth it. We fought interesting UNMs, traversed the unexplored land, and I found myself sitting with the broadest grin on my face. It was the same feeling I remember when 14 first launched, but it felt better than ever. Not just because of the new coat of paint, but because it was like meeting an old friend. An old friend I fell in love with, grew old with, and whom I wanted to share that adventure with all over again. More importantly, I am looking forward to the new friendships I wish to forge and connecting with the people who were once servers apart from me. To be able to play with not just all of the Sequence Break 14 and Zantensuken.net crew, but its fans or even just the cool people I met via Twitter. Despite the personality I portray on the podcast, I am a shy and quiet person who deeply cherishes the few friendships she has and holds them far dearer than any of the possessions I may own. The release of A Realm Reborn is still weeks away, but I look upon it with the same anticipation and eagerness that I had for the original. The only difference is I have more friends than before looking forward to its release, and who hope to spend a longer time in the land of Eorzea.